My name is Rebecca Tan, this is Making LARP, and today I'm going to show you how I made this crochet witch's hat, which is part of my new character kit for my character Mistress Hollow. Written instructions for this pattern will be available as part of its project page on Ravelry in the notes section. Before I start showing you how to make the witch's hat, I feel like I should give any complete novice knitters and crocheters a bit of Yarn 101. Yarn is available in a wide variety of fabric. The witch's hat that I have made is a wool and acrylic blend. There are a wide variety available, not just in wool, but silk, cashmere, cotton. There's a world of colours out there. That's actually a skein of yarn that I hand dyed myself. Yarn thickness is described as its weight. For example, a yarn could be fingering weight, sock weight, Aran weight. I work 2 gauge swatches using the ball band's recommendation that a good gauge would be using a 4mm crochet hook. I tested both that and a 4.5 and then decided that I would use the 4.5 but hold 2 strands of yarn at the same time to get the effect that I wanted. Crochet hooks come in a wide variety of sizes. In the UK these are generally listed as being a millimetre thickness, and this is the thickness of the main body of the hook. Hooks have a flattened area in the middle which are for your fingers to rest on, and you would have tried to avoid using those as where any of your loops are being stored. I hope this basic overview has helped. Now on to the main part of the video. To show you how to make the hat, I'm going to be using this nice bright turquoise yarn and a slightly larger hook. This is 6mm than I would have done. Black yarn is notoriously hard to get decent images of, and for learning the techniques you really do need to be able to see the stitch definition. To start off with, for almost any normal stitch, first thing you would do is make a slip knot, which just involves wrapping the yarn around your hands, putting the hook through and catching it. And then you tighten that up and you've got your first little knot there. First and most basic stitch you will then need to know for crochet is chain stitch. It's also referred to as single stitch in British crochet, which is the terminology I'll be using. If you do start branching out and looking at different patterns online, you will find that there are 2 types of stitch language for crochet, which is British and American. You will want to kind of get some sort of familiarity of what certain stitches look like, because the same stitch is given different names. So it's useful to be able to look at a pattern and see, oh, that's actually a treble. This must be an American pattern because it's calling it a double. For the witch's hat, you only need to know 2 stitches, which are the chain stitch. As I said, that's single. So all you're doing is you're wrapping the yarn around the hook, that, and the resulting stitch is like that, just a little chain. Now if you're working a flat pattern, or once you've done your establishing row for any other crochet pattern, you would then build some stitches into that row. Now I'm going to show you how to do a double stitch. We won't use it in this pattern unless you particularly want to do the whole pattern in a double stitch instead. It will give you a slightly firmer fabric than the treble, which is what I did the hat in. But obviously, because it's a small stitch, it will take longer to do. Double stitch is before you put your hook through the stitch, you wrap the yarn around once. And then, as you're going into a chain stitch, I generally recommend that you do your first stitch into the pieces at the back. It gives you a nicer finish on the bottom edge. So if you were starting a new row, you would skip 2 stitches and then go into the 3rd. So you'd put your hook through that piece of yarn, then slip a piece of yarn over and pull through, and then slip a piece of yarn over and pull through again. So again, you wrap around once, put a yarn through, yarn over and pull through 2 loops, yarn over and pull through 2 loops. Amazingly enough, what we Brits refer to as a treble stitch is simply the exact same thing, but this time you're starting with a second loop on your hook. So you're going to put your hook through, round the first 2 stitches and through, round the first 2 stitches and through, round the first 2 stitches and through, and you should be able to see from the fabric there that these first 2 stitches are shorter and this one is longer. Now what we will be doing in this hat as well is an increase, and in crochet this is very simple. You simply do a stitch as normal, but you do it into a stitch that already has a stitch put into it. So there's my stitch already done, there's the loop it went into. I've pulled a bit of space so I can fit my hook in it again, and I'm just simply doing another treble. And that would be your simple increase. So the witch's hat is going to be worked entirely in trebles with the occasional increase. Again, you could do it in doubles if you want for a slightly scrunchier fabric. Personally, I think for me that would have been a little bit too hard to work with. If I decided actually I don't want to put an increase there, I would take the hook out of the yarn, I would find the loop for the last stitch that I wanted to use. So in this case I'm going to go back to the double stitches and put my hook through there, and then very simply pull on the end of the yarn until it's pulled out the stitches that I want, and that leaves me straight again back on the double stitches on my hook. This project is going to be worked in the round, but if you were working a flat project, what you would do is when you came to the end of the row, you would take your hook out, turn your project round so that you're now going back in the direction you've already done. So I'd be wanting to use that stitch there. So my hook's now facing the right way. You would redo a new chain to start the row. Because these are doubles, you would do 2 chains. And again, a loop round into the top of the first double, and there we go. So now I've shown you the basic stitches. What I'm actually going to show you how to do is to start your hat with a magic loop, which again you would loop the yarn around your hand. However, this time instead of pulling it into a slip knot, you do a small one there, keep the yarn on your hook and start your first chain from there. As I mentioned, this stitch is going to be trebles, so this time we do 3 chains. And I'd loop the yarn round and do it over, you can see here, over the 2 ends of the yarn wrapped around each other. Actually make the stitches over that area. In this case we're doing 6 stitches to start with, including the chain, so you'll make 5 actual stitches plus your 3 chain stitches. And then you can take the end of the yarn and pull that round and make it as small as you want to help you get your nice point. I would generally try and tuck this yarn in. I'm going to leave it loose as it is, sew it back up the end, but I do also sometimes keep the ends and kind of lay them over the stitches as I'm working, kind of weave them in as I go. Because this is in the round, before you move on to the next row or round, you need to kind of step up. So you'd work a single crochet or a slip stitch as it's more likely to be referred in this instance, by putting your hook into the top of the first of the starting chain and then taking your yarn across as normal. In this case, for the first round, we're going to be doing all increases, so 2 stitches in each of the loops to start with. But first you're going to do, again, your starting chain of 3 stitches. So again, 2 stitches round your hook. We're going to start on the first loop rather than the one that the chain is attached to, and you're going to make 2 loops into that first stitch, and 2 loops into each of your subsequent stitches. As you can see from having drawn around, it's already starting to make a little point there. Now I've got to the end of the little section there. I'm only going to be leaving just the chain on the stitch there, so as you can see that's the stitch where it's coming out of, and I'll not be doing an extra stitch into there to make it 2 on each side, and that's going to help make it more pointy. So as I don't need that around my needle, again, once I've got round, find the top chain, find the bit at the back, stick my hook through, turn it right way around, and that's first row done. Start my chain. This time what we're doing is increasing on the first stitch, doing just 1 stitch in the next, and then 2 in the next one. As you can see, 2 stitches here, 1 stitch there, 2 stitches there. Now what I'm going to be doing for my own reference, and as an idea I'm suggesting would be good for the rest of you to follow, is taking some hair clips. You can get proper custom made crochet slip markers, but to be honest, if you're just starting out, you're just as likely to have hair clips or paper clips, anything like that, where you can easily push it through without risking causing damage to the yarn. I'm just putting it through the bottom of my 2 increase sections. As I mentioned, obviously you're leaving a gap. So you can see there, they're round the 2 increased stitches, and I'm then going to be working around of no increases after this one, so it helps me be able to look back and count the number of non-increased stitches between the markers, so that if I'm leaving the project and coming back to it, I can easily see what I was doing. So we'll continue on. So you've got increase, 1 stitch, increase, so then you're back to 1 stitch. Then another set of 2 stitches in the single loop until you get back around to the beginning. So you're alternating with 1 stitch between each set of 2 stitches. So this time we've done our row of plain, and now we're going to have again the increase in the first stitch. So 2 stitches into there. And this time we're going to have 2 stitches where there is just 1 stitch in each. And then I'm going to move my markers. Now we're going to continue like this, having 1 row completely plain, then your increase row with extra stitches left between each set of 2 stitches each time. By the time I'd finished my full-sized hat, I had 9 stitches between each, and then you're going to leave another row of no increases before you go onto the brim. Now I would say start kind of measuring and trying on your hat from about 6 stitches in. Be aware that your brim is going to fold your hat a little, so you do want it slightly too big. But I'm aware that because mine was going over a headdress, which is what I was trying it on over, that 9 stitches might be too big for pretty much most people that are wearing it just straight over their head. Once your hat is the size that you want, obviously this one's staying quite small because it's just for demonstration purposes, you're then going to do another row of increasing in every single stitch, so 2 stitches in every stitch. So 2 stitches in every stitch, and you can do that all the way around. As you can see, just from doing that row of increases, the yarn is automatically wanting to curve itself upwards, which is a great basis for your brim. And obviously, if you're doing a full size, you're going to want to do a few more rows. I would continue in the pattern we did in the hat, where you do a row of just plain and then a row with increases. Personally, I found that as you're going on, the hat becomes a little bit floppy at the brim. Real hat, you can sort of see that the edges are folding in a bit. Again, you can kind of see why it's hard for me to have shown you how to do this on the black yarn. And this is, the more that you're increasing, the floppier it's going to be. If you find it's getting too floppy, just stick with going round and round without adding increases until you're happy with the amount of brim that you've gone. Again, try it on, have a look in the mirror, just keep checking as you do each row. If you're wanting to tidy up the ends when you are happy, you can then go through and do one last round, and this time just do single crochet. So you're just sticking your hook in, no wrap rounds, and through. And this will give you a slightly nicer edge without adding a lot of weight or depth to it. Once you are finished with the yarn completely, you just pull it up through the last loop and then snip the end somewhere there, pull it tight, make sure it's not going to fall out, and then using either the crochet hook, though you might want to go a size smaller, or a yarn needle, go through and weave in the ends, and again you do the same with the end at the top. Now we're going to do the band as a piece worked flat. This is because you're going to want to have some flexibility in how big you make it, and also because it's going to be easier to attach to your hat. So to start with, you're going to make a slip knot, and then you're going to want to chain for, I would say, about 8 stitches. Once you get a bit of the work done, you can always measure it up against your hat and see if it looks too wide or too thin, and go back and add a couple more stitches. Now for the band, I'm doing this in double crochet. So because we're going to do double crochet, you wrap around the hook once, skip the first 2 stitches, go into the 3rd loop, and you're going to continue with double stitches to the end of the row. You should then have your little turning section from the chain that you didn't use, and 6 stitches. And as I showed you before, you take your hook out and then turn it in the yarn and do your starting 2 chain, and that's 2 turn. And you're going to work back and forth until it is long enough to wrap all the way round your hat. Normally I would weave in the ends, but because I'm going to be attaching it to the hat, these are actually quite useful to keep loose so that I can use them to keep the band in place and stop it falling off. So if you just continue on working in double crochet until it's the length that you want. If you skip the first stitch that has a chain attached to it and start on the one after, now what you're going to want to do once you've got the piece the size you want is you're going to want to take your loop, you're going to want to cut your yarn and then pull the end of the yarn through. You're going to want to get the 2 ends together. You're going to want to take your yarn and use a yarn darning needle. As you can see, it's got a nice big eye so you can fit the wool through, and you're going to want to join the pieces together. Any kind of stitch will do. You're just trying to make it so that they're sewn together as flatly as possible. So I'm just simply going from one side to the other and then pulling back around. One of the benefits of using a yarn needle for doing this is that they're blunted, so it makes it easier to make sure that you're going through the already made stitches of your yarn and not splitting the yarn. It's not something to worry about as much with this, which is an acrylic project, but if you were using more expensive yarn, then it's something you really wouldn't want to do. And as well, it kind of affects the quality of presentation of your project. There you go. You can see it's all attached. The actual stitch where your yarns be attached are not particularly noticeable, but if you do want to make it look a bit nicer, turn your piece inside out and it looks a little bit more just like normal crochet from that side. I would then slip this over the hat and then go back and forth, taking the needle into the hat, back out through. So I'm attaching it to both the hat and the band, and just keep doing that till I run out of yarn, and then do a nice little, just go over and over the same piece and maybe pull the yarn through all those extra pieces. Is a nice way of finishing it off quite securely with the ends, and again do the same at the bottom of the piece with your leftover starting yarn, and that should keep it relatively secure so you don't have to worry about it falling off. So that's the basics of how to make the witch's hat. As I mentioned before, the written pattern for this will be linked below. It will be the Ravelry link to the project page of the witch's hat, and it will all be included in the notes section there. I hope you've enjoyed this make, and I'll be trying to do a few more makes in the future until we move on to our next discussion point. If you'd like to suggest makes or discussions that you would like to see in future videos, please do get in touch via the Facebook group.